Hey guys, Reader back with another 6 stories of mustard spiked milk, Karens getting what they deserve and more. Loud teens in movie get what they deserve. Just a week ago, me and a friend went to go see Frozen 2 with our parents and our younger siblings. It was the second day of being open, so there was a long wait outside due to the movie being popular. I see out of the corner of my eye 3 teenage kids about our age with a bag of groceries and a frozen pizza. That was pretty weird considering that they were in line for the movie and didn't have any way to heat up the pizza. So anyways, we finally got in line for concessions, and guess who was in front of us? None other than the 3 teens themselves. I see that one of them has a huge square in their sweatshirt. I don't know where the bag of groceries went. Me and my friend sat down on our own away from the little kids. We weren't exactly happy to find out that the 3 teenagers were behind us. Almost immediately, the problems started. First, they were talking and laughing extremely loudly. Then, they started kicking our seats. There's nothing that ticks me off more than when people do that. Especially people who know better. The icing on the cake is when they started taking selfies with the flash on. This continued on for a good 10 minutes. Pretty much everyone was getting annoyed and they were told to stop more than once. My friend just leaned over to me and said he'd be right back. He returns about a minute later. Not 30 seconds later, the owner of the theater comes over and talks to them about what they did. Once he left, they were quiet for the rest of the movie. I asked my friend, quietly, what he told them. He told the guy everything. That's what you get when you aren't quiet in the movies. Idiot driver gets slowed down. I was driving home from work earlier today. I'm based in the UK, so those are the driving rules and conditions that apply. I moved to the right at a large roundabout. This particular roundabout is just off a motorway. I was intending to exit at the motorway exit, which has 2 off ramps. I moved into the right lane to make sure I'd be ahead of the lorry that I was currently stuck behind. I hit traffic lights still on the roundabout. Then I saw a sports car behind me who moved into the left-hand lane, now in front of the lorry, which was moving slower due to the nature of the road. He then proceeded to cut in front of me. This was entirely unnecessary. He did take the same exit as me, but wanted to make sure he beat me to it. Basically, he was moving between lanes as many times as he could, just to stay ahead of everybody else. Typical sports car driver. He was older, which I'd glimpsed as he passed me. That really annoys me when people do this sort of thing unnecessarily. So as I moved onto the motorway, I moved as far to the right as possible, as soon as possible. I made it into the fastest lane, while the sports car was still in the middle lane. I then sped up and caught up to the cars already in that lane. This worked easily because of it being a Sunday and about 9 AM. I'd worked very early. He was waiting for space to move into the fast lane. I managed to get in front of him through this luck of timing of the cars. He pulled in behind me, at which point my pettiness was allowed to play out. I maintained speed until I reached cars in the middle lane. Then I slowed down and matched their speed. He started flashing his lights to get me to let him pass. I ignored it. I could see him waving his hands and getting frustrated. I kept doing it. After 10 minutes or so, he did manage to find a gap to undertake me. I tried to speed up to not let him pass, but I knew he could leave me in the dust if he had the room, which he did. As he passed me, I just turned and gave him such a massive grin. It was the best I could do to wind him up that little bit more. And I should add that I have front and back cameras, so wasn't overly concerned about road rage. They are visible and act as a decent deterrent. Got revenge against Karen, the neglectful mom. So, context. I'm from a country where 2-wheelers are a major thing for transport. Also, I'm a teen. So a few months back, I went to a grocery store on my bicycle. Just as I was about to turn into the parking spot, guess who comes in from the wrong side? Karen. Or the Karen's version of my country. She was zooming in at about 30 kmph from the wrong side with her 425-year-old kid in the front of the scooter while talking on her phone. Hadn't I braked hard, my wrist would have been fractured easily. I was expecting her to at least be sorry about her reckless driving, but no. She just walks away with her kid. I was a little angry at her. NGL. I was just at the store to grab some noodles, and she was there to grab some milk. We both got in about at the same time, picked only one item, and so we got in adjacent lines at the checkout counter. I noticed that the kid was pulling on her dress, asking her to buy him candy. She was still talking on her phone, but she managed to calm him down. Being the petty teen that I am, I quickly grabbed 2 huge chocolate bars in front of the kid and put them in my cart. He started screaming. He was throwing a tantrum, throwing stuff around. I sneakily put the chocolate bars back, paid and left. During those 30-ish seconds, the kid screamed and cried, tugging hard on his mom's dress. The Karen was frantically trying to calm him down and bought some candy. 2 things. 1 point, the kid got candy, so he was happy later. 2. Seeing Karen trying to calm her kid, stressed and embarrassing herself, felt kinda good after she almost broke my hand and probably hurt her kid. From the looks of the kid's tantrums, I really felt bad about him too. He was probably not paid attention to by his mom, so I think his behavior was a result of that. Posted this on Entitled Parents, but felt it belonged here. Wake me up mowing the lawn at 7 AM on a Saturday? I'll be sure to make you re-wax your car. This happened years and years ago, while my mom was on active duty in the Air Force. My parents had moved into base housing because the cost was lower and they could afford it. Now this base is in California, so during the summer months, there is almost always a drought. Despite this, military regulations state the lawn must be green when your home is inspected. So every few days, my dad would put out a sprinkler to keep the grass from going dormant and looking like crap. As I said earlier, the grass had to be kept green, but it also had to be kept neatly trimmed, so about once every week the lawn needed to be mown. Now my dad would usually do this in the early evening after the sun had gone just below the tops of the trees, but before the temperature dropped too much. Their eye-hole neighbor, however, liked to mow the lawn between his house and my parents at exactly 7 AM each Saturday morning. Unfortunately, this woke up my parents because of where their bedroom was. My mom tried asking nicely for the neighbor to maybe wait till 8 or 9 so they could at least get a little extra sleep, but neighbor was a duck and ignored them. Now this neighbor had a prized possession, a beautiful new car, which he babied every chance he got. Every week when he got done mowing, he'd wash and wax his car. I should mention that the way the street was laid out, the property where my parents had to water formed a wedge with the point in the front lawn. Anyway, once the neighbor was finished waxing his car, my dad would make a big show of adjusting the sprinkler to water right down the property line, then going inside for a bit. Sadly, the sprinkler tended to wander after a little bit, and since neighbor's driveway was right in the property line, oops, looks like his car got a lot sprayed by the hose water. Oh well, guess he'd have to wax it again. Edit. I want to reiterate that this was my parents, and this was at least 35 years ago. Mustard water milk. During their divorce, my stepfather was one day particularly more badish to my mother, so while he was out, a plan was concocted. My SF was an avid milk drink, like 1.5 gallons of milk a week. The plan was simple: put that mustard water that forms when the mustard hasn't been used in a while. The reason why you usually shake the mustard before using it, ketchup has a similar effect, into the drinking milk. Since he drank so much milk, and since cooking often requires milk, we had 2 jugs, a gallon for SF to drink, and a half gallon to cook with. Being very careful, my mother squirted the mustard water into his milk, then proceeds to shake it to make sure the mustard water is fully incorporated into the milk. But she ran into a problem. The milk became a tinge of yellow. Worried, the plan was still in motion. All she could do was place the milk back in the fridge and wait. And wait she did. That night, almost as if the gods of petty revenge guided him, my SF took a big glass of mustard water milk, not noticing the slight yellow tinge to it, and drank it. The following days my mother and I watched, me being in on the plan, as my SF took and drank more and more glasses of milk. None the wiser he never brought up the taste, but I had a glass myself to see if it was noticeable, and it was. One could definitely taste a slight mustard flavor to the milk. It was gross. However, the next week, my mom watered down the milk, something she did to elongate the use of the milk, seeing as my SF had started to drink out of the cooking milk too, and boy was he upset about the watered down milk, having an argument with my mother as soon as he tasted the milk, but mustard water milk was just fine. Abusive stepfather's cup of tea. My stepfather was abusive verbally and physically. He was also an avid tea drinker. We are British and would drink huge pint mugs of it at a time. He would have about 10 or so of these a day. The thing about this wanker is that he wouldn't make them himself. He would yell for my brother or I and we would have to drop everything and make him his tea. I actually don't drink it because I can't stand the smell anymore after being a tea servant. It didn't matter if we were playing, doing homework, inside, outside, still in bed. He would yell and you would have to go running. One day he decided that I was going to make him his next cup of tea. I was upstairs revising for my A-levels and he yelled for me. I tried explaining I was revising, but zero craps were given by this lovely man. So I made the tea, but I put some extra ingredients in it. A pinch of mustard powder, a pinch of salt, dust from the top of the cupboard. I'm not joking. I'm being serious. And then I got a little of the dog's drinking water, which usually had some drool in it, and put that in too. I was crapping myself when I gave it to him. I was convinced that I was going to get another few slaps round the head, his favorite punishment, but at this point I was committed, so I went back upstairs. He didn't call me again for a few hours, but when he did he told me that the cup of tea I had made for him was the best he'd ever had. I felt good though, knowing what I knew, and having a little smile every time I walked past the dog's drinking bowl. I took my exams and then moved out the next week. I passed them all. Thanks for watching. What was your favorite story?